Hey, Carl Reese here, coming at you with Bible Prophecy, why we watch and pray. And today I'm going to be just doing a little bit of a Middle East peace plan, Middle East update on Bible prophecy and everything that's going on over there. Because we know that Bible prophecy, it starts and ends with Israel. I've talked about that many times and actually have done a whole series on the history of why that is and why God, who is the author of the Bible and of all of its prophecies, has chosen to use Israel as his sort of bellwether and has chosen to let the promises, not only of the first coming of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, to flow through Israel, but also of his second coming, which is, I believe, right around the corner. And so the prophecies of the Bible are why we come together, is because this is what's interesting to me. It's amazing that a book that was written so many years ago and the prophecies that were written 2,600 plus years ago, pointing at today. I just think that's fascinating. It's amazing that not only someone could predict things so far in the future that would come to pass with such stunning accuracy, but that I got chosen somehow by the author of the universe to live at such a time as this. I think there's probably only one other time in history which is perhaps as interesting, and to have been in Israel when Jesus, the Son of God, came the first time. I think that would have been absolutely amazing. But here we are, just at the cusp of his pledged second coming. And here we are, living, breathing, able to talk about it, having this awesome technology to be able to talk about it and shoot those thoughts that we have across the globe. I have so many friends in different places across the globe that tune in to the things that I'm saying and are following the events of the world very closely. So before I dive in here, I always like to go over my Bible prophecy ground rules. I'm going to let the Bible interpret itself. If I'm going to compare spiritual with spiritual, if it's not plainly interpreted in the text, that means I'm going to let the passages that talk about a certain topic be consistent in my interpretation of those passages everywhere I find it in the Bible, comparing what it says here with what it says there, and letting my interpretation form a complementary understanding of the two and not a contradictory understanding of the two. They are and must remain completely in sync because there's only one God who wrote both. Maybe through the mouths and the perspectives of two different people, but he's the one that is the author of it all. Make no mistake. It's got to be consistent. It keeps us safe, by the way, too, because the Bible it's actually it says it's a stumbling block to those who don't believe, meaning you can go in there and start stumbling over the passages as you try to force them to say what you want them to say, or completely miss what they're saying in order to justify your way of living or whatever. You're welcome to go into the Bible and make it say anything you want. But of course that doesn't help anyone or anything, because it's only the truth that sets us free. And if you're really passionate about knowing the God of the Bible and understanding the truth that only comes from him, then you have to go and approach the Bible like it prescribes, and then it will reveal itself to you. And so I compare spiritual with spiritual. If it's not interpreted, I'm going to make sure I let my stronger or more confident interpretations come in the mouth of two or three witnesses. And if there's not two or three witnesses, if there's only in one place, then I'm going to still believe that and take it literally, but I won't necessarily form any sort of dogmatic opinion or strong understanding of that, except what God may reveal to me in my own private time. But for those, you got to get it in your own private time. It'll be something between him and me. And finally, if I don't know the answer, if I don't know some subject, and I haven't studied that enough yet, or have no revelation, I'm perfectly happy just saying, I just don't know. And that is so many things in the Bible. I really wanted to bring up today and talk about the Middle East. And why the Middle East? And why am I focused so intently on the events of the Middle East? Well, it's because the Bible actually talks about the the fact that there's a Middle East peace agreement that is going to trigger the beginning of the final 7 years leading up to the culmination of this era or of this age and the return of Jesus Christ to the earth. That's the exciting event. You know, something happens, and the Bible says that no man knows the day or the hour, but it says nothing about the fact that God knows and that he may or may not reveal that to men. I believe that it's indicating that he absolutely will reveal it to the people who are living at the times of the end. And he has. We don't know the day or the hour until that final 7 years gets kicked off. At which time we can look forward to say, okay, we got 7 more years, right? And then Jesus will return. So what is that event that is supposed to kick off this final countdown or this final time clock preceding the return of Jesus Christ? Well, we find that in Daniel chapter 27. And I'm going to just sort of bounce there as we read the Bible. In Daniel, the 24th verse, and actually the verses 24 all the way through verse 27, all of these verses actually refer to a prophecy that first refers to the first coming of Jesus, and then it refers to the second coming of Jesus. 70 weeks, that is 70 weeks of years, are determined upon your people and upon your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end to sins, and to make a reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. It says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. 60 being 60, and 2 is 62 weeks. And the street shall be built again in the wall, even in troublesome times. Now, this part, it goes on and it says, and after the 62 weeks, it means after the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks, shall Messiah be cut off. That is, shall be killed. That's what that's talking about. He'll be cut off, but it won't be for himself. And we learn in Isaiah 53 that Jesus prophesied that he would be killed for the sins of the people. While he himself is sinless, he would be killed not for his own sins, but for all of our sins. And here Daniel is just reconfirming that. He'll be killed, but not for himself. And then it says, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and it shall end, and in the end shall be with the flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Now all of that has actually been fulfilled. It has all been fulfilled. Jesus already came. 445 BC is when the word went out to go forth and restore and rebuild the temple. Before that, it went out to Ezra, who went in back into Jerusalem after their exile to start rebuilding the temple. And then in 445, the word went forth to Nehemiah to go and rebuild the walls surrounding the temple. And this prophecy is specifically refers to those walls. That's how we know that it's referring to Nehemiah's command that came from Artaxerxes, I believe, to go and restore. It was the start of that period where we start counting 69 weeks. It's a 7-week period, which I believe that was the time that he took to restore the walls. 7 weeks, 49 years. Then 62 weeks would pass before the Messiah would be cut off. 445 BC, you can go and check that out. Look it up in your Wikipedia as to when Nehemiah got the command and when that was to go and restore the walls of the temple. 445. If you add 483 years, you get roughly 32 AD, which is roughly the time that Jesus was crucified, right? So, and I dare say, I think it's absolutely exact, but I'm not going to belabor the point. It's darn close. It's darn close, because the historians may disagree on the exact time and the exact year, and but it's right near that time, right, when Jesus was crucified. The prophecy of Daniel 24 through 26, incredibly accurate. And it goes on and it says that after that, the people of the prince that shall come shall be destroyed, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Well, that happened in AD 70, about 30 or 40 years after Jesus was crucified. the temple was destroyed by the people of the prince. This prince is talking about Satan. Satan. In another place in John, Jesus said, the prince of this world comes and will find nothing in me. And in another place it says in Ephesians chapter 2 that Satan is referred to as the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now works inside the children of disobedience. Well, the Romans were the children of disobedience in Jesus' day. In fact, they were the ones whose hands crucified the Messiah. Sure, they were put up to it, and he was tried and convicted and turned over by his own people, the Jews. But the ones who pronounced sentence and carried it out were the Romans, and they were the barbaric, if you will, rulers of the earth during the days that Jesus came the first time. Very cruel. And in fact, their methods of torture and of death, crucifixion in and of itself, is the most excruciating kind of death that you could put someone through. And after they finished flogging and whipping and tearing the skin wide open of someone condemned to death, then they would, take them to the cross and nail them up there and let them suffocate themselves to death while they fought to gain some air, pushing up on their feet that were nailed into a pole, and just until they finally died of asphyxiation, or when it got a little bit late and they got tired of it, so they just broke their legs to accelerate the process. I mean, just brutal stuff going on. And it says, the people of the prince of the power of the air, those children of disobedience, yea, the Romans, the people of that prince shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary, and they did. And the end of it would be with a flood, even unto the end of the war. Desolations are determined. I believe this is a spiritual war that's in heaven, and it's culminated in Revelation chapter 12, when it talks about Michael and his angels fighting with Satan and his angels and overcoming them. That is yet to occur. That hasn't occurred. It won't happen until 3.5 years into this final 7-year period. But again, you can go to Revelation chapter 12 if you want to read about that. So, and then it goes on with this pronoun. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, or a 7-year period. Who is the he? Right? First of all, it's singular, so it's not talking about the people. It's going back to the last pronoun, which was the prince, right? Or the antecedent of this pronoun, which is the prince. So you can put in there, the prince will confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Satan, the spirit that works in the people of today, the same way he was working in the people of Jesus' day to get them to do his bidding, which was to kill the Messiah. Well, they're still doing his bidding, and many people who don't know Jesus are still doing the bidding of Satan today. And people will come together at the beckon of Satan today to confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Not just one, not just two, but with many. Well, what is this covenant? Well, in past studies, we've gone through that. This is the covenant that God made with Abraham, wherein he pledged to Abraham that I will give you the land of Israel way down to the border with Egypt, all the way up through Syria, up to the Euphrates River, and going east even into Jordan some ways. And he promised to give that to him for an everlasting inheritance. He made a covenant with him that that land would belong to him and to his seed after him forever. Forever. Now, right now, the Jews are back in their land, but they're having to fight tooth and nail just to stay alive in that land, much less to hold on to it or to expand it. Everyone is on all sides of them are their enemies, trying to squash them and run them off into the sea, or so it has been historically. But times are actually kind of changing now, where the Jews actually since 2018 and Donald Trump getting into office, who really is changing the game to give Israel an opportunity to become, at least on paper, accepted in the region, right? Trump is actually doing a ton of work right now through his emissaries, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his 20-year lawyer and confidant, Jason Greenblatt, to go into the Middle East as his envoys to establish a peace plan between the Palestinians who live in the West Bank and in Gaza, and the Israelis to end the eternal feud in that region so that there can be peace. Trump actually feels like that peace in this region, and many in the world actually feel like, peace in this region will be the catalyst that would probably draw peace in many other regions of the earth today. And we're all out for peace and safety, right? The Bible even says that we would cry out for that at some point just before the end. But everybody's tired of all the fighting over there, not the least of whom are the people doing the fighting in the region, right? So Trump, through Kushner and through Greenblatt, have come up with a peace plan that that's already inked and it's done, and they're simply waiting for the right time to deploy it into the region and to begin to gain the momentum to get something signed. Nobody has seen this, the actual text of this agreement. Little parts and bits and pieces of it leak out here and there. But the fact is, we know he has it, and we know he's waiting to put it forth and to try to push it through. What is he waiting for? Well, he's waiting for the impending elections that are right now in full force and full thrust going on in Israel that are going to happen in early April. And so, not wanting to influence the outcome of the election, Trump has basically agreed to withhold his peace agreement, or his peace plan at least, that he wants to try to push through until after the Israeli elections, right? So, sort of seeing the movements of the things that are happening there that have been accelerated in these days, we start to see the seed of the covenant, confirming Israel's right to the land that was promised to Abraham, coming together in the not too distant future. Now, I don't know for sure if it's because we've had many of these peace plans between Israel and the Palestinians, most of which haven't stuck. But the peace plan that will be the fulfillment of this prophecy has to have certain characteristics, right? We know that it has to establish a two-state solution, right? We know that because in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus talks about the fact that in the middle of this 7-week period that Daniel talks about, Jesus refers back to this passage in Daniel in Matthew chapter 24. And he says, in the midst of that time, in the midst of the 7-year period, or the 3.5-year period, it says that the Antichrist is going to stand in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And when he comes out, the Jews that are in the West Bank region, he calls it Judea, that's ancient Judea, the land that was carved out for Judah, the tribe of Judah, which is covering Jerusalem in the West Bank region that's right now being occupied by the Palestinians. The Jews that are living there, right? All this you hear in the news about the settlements and whatnot, you probably, if you follow any Middle East news, the Jews have been moving in there and establishing settlements and expanding their territory into this disputed region for years. That's part of what has the Palestinians sort of up in arms. It's like, we don't want you coming in here taking this land, right? We want to have this as our homeland and as our nation, and so forth and so on. And since you can't come to an agreement, the Jews are like, okay, we're just going to keep moving people in there and making settlements. And this has been one big source of contention. But to fulfill the prophecy, the Jews have to be there. Because what it says is that halfway through this period, when he says he's God, it says, let the Jews that are in Judea, that means there are Jews in Judea, in the West Bank, let them get their hat and hit the ground running. Because there will come persecution out of that temple from the Antichrist against the Jews, such as never has been seen before on the earth, nor ever shall be again. Now, we know the Jews have suffered some pretty horrendous persecutions in their day. Not just in the time when Babylon came and ran them out of there, and that caused the destruction of the first temple that was built by Solomon, and them to have to come back from exile. But as recently as the 1940s, when Hitler in his Holocaust was just wiping Jews out left and right. Pretty horrendous persecution that this group has fallen under. And yet the Bible talks of a time where there will come persecution even greater than that. This will be the final persecution against the Jews. But the Bible is very clear that that's coming. It's very clear that that's coming. So this tells me that there needs to be the two-state solution, because the Jews need to be able to live in that region under Palestinian control, the same way many Palestinians are living in Israel under the Israeli government control. So they're going to not have to give up their lands and all that stuff when they establish this nation. They'll be able to live there as a Jewish minority in the Palestinian state. That's probably going to come out of this agreement. It's going to set up some sort of sharing arrangement for the city of Jerusalem, right? This agreement right now, I know, because I've been following very closely all the discussion around how they're going to get to peace here, and the major sticking point that Greenblatt and Kushner nor anyone of the presidents before have been able to resolve is, what will we do about Jerusalem? Now, Jerusalem, as you know, has been the eternal capital of Israel for 3,000 plus years minimum, right? When David purchased the Temple Mount, the threshing floor of Araunah, it was called in 2 Samuel, purchased it for 50 shekels of silver. And there was where the first temple was built by Solomon, his son, not many years after, but it was bought by the king of Israel at the time. The only known purchase of this land ever, right? That would cause him to at least be the legal owner at some point in history, whereas every point after that has been taken over by conquest, including the current time that Israel's in there right now. They had to literally conquest and run the Jordanians and the Palestinians up out of there to get control. But they were run out, and then they ran people out, and then the Muslims came in and ran people out, and then the Catholics came and took it, and everybody's been in there basically jockeying for this land called Jerusalem. Because this is the place that God pledged that he would put his name forever. And the spiritual battle that ensued from that day has been nothing short of cataclysmic. The devil refuses to let anyone take this ground. And that's why he'll stand there right in the heart of this ground and try to declare himself God. This is my ground. Because he opposes everything that is God or that is called God. That's his whole makeup and purpose. That's why he'll rise up in these last days and do the things that he's about to do. So we know that sticking point is going to be a blocker for this Middle East peace plan. And so what they're going to have to do is come up with some sort of sharing arrangement, probably internationally controlled because they don't trust each other. Maybe the UN comes in and says, hey, we'll be the peacekeepers here to make sure you guys keep the word of this agreement, and so forth and so on. That has to happen. Now, this agreement is not going to be one like the historical ones that Jimmy Carter put together with Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat, or the one that Clinton established between Ehud Barak, I believe, and Yasser Arafat. These were just two states in there trying to make an agreement. Whereas this passage here says that he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. That's what's so intriguing about this new effort to get peace, is that Trump has not done this thing the way that everyone before him has. He literally is going through and trying to garner support for an agreement, not just between Israel and the Palestinians, but all the neighboring nations all around. These guys have traveled to Saudi Arabia, to United Arab Emirates, to Qatar, to Jordan, to Egypt, to Lebanon, and talking to all these guys around. We know the United States, we have real influence with Israel. What we've always been missing is a counterbalancing or equal influence to drive the Palestinians to the table. And so we're making a deal with these surrounding nations so that my live stream went offline. It's going to reconnect any second. I have to wait. Okay, it reconnected for me. So I'm just going to roll with that and see how that works out. Okay. So I'm going to actually flip this to, I'm going to jump to Revelation. No, I'm going to change that. Let's go to Matthew. So I'm actually going to switch this thing and I'm going to go over to Matthew 24, because I've been kind of referring to this passage. I think it's probably worthwhile to read it. Matthew 24. And we can see okay, so Matthew 24, the Great Tribulation, and then right, gospel preached to all nations. There we go, in verse 14. Now this is Jesus speaking, right? And Jesus actually has, he says in verse 14, the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto them. And then shall the end come, right? And he says, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, and we just saw the passage over there by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let them who are in Judea flee into the mountains, and let him who is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him who is in the field return back to take his clothes. Woe unto them that are with child, and unto them that nurse a child in those days. But pray that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And that was the passage that I was referring to before when I was talking about the fact that this will be a tribulation that's coming. And it will start halfway through this final 7-year period, right? That was referred to by Daniel. And how do I know it's halfway through that that's going to occur? I'm going to actually go back. I'm going to go back to Daniel chapter 9. Bounce this. And in Daniel 9, we go right back down to verse 27. He says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the offering to cease. Again, we're talking about Satan, remember, the abominable one. He will cause the sacrifice and offering to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. This is the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, where he said that's what he said. When you see that event, then let the Jews of Judea flee, right? Here we know that that's going to happen in the midst of this 7-year period, or right in the middle. Now, there are many passages in the Bible that refer to a 3.5-year period. In the book of Revelation, it talks about 1,260 days, it talks about 42 months, it talks about a time, times, and half a time. I believe that's also in Daniel 12, where it says it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. A time being 1 year, times being 2 years, and a half a time being a half a year. It talks about a 3.5-year period for certain things to occur. So the 7 years is further broken down into 2 3.5-year chunks where different things will happen in the first half and in the second half. There's going to be this great tribulation that's kicked off, it says, in the midst of the 7-year period, or at the 3.5-year mark. And that coincides with the war that went on in heaven, which we see in Revelation chapter 12. Why don't we bounce there? In Revelation 12, in verse 7, we see that it says, and there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. And he prevailed not, neither was his place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So we're actually very clear here about who we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that was the devil, right? Satan is that dragon. And so anywhere we start seeing talks about the dragon in the Bible, we should in our mind know that that's one of the names used for Satan himself. The other was the serpent. He's called a serpent in the Garden of Eden when he's there tempting Adam and Eve to take a bite out of that piece of fruit that caused the fall of all mankind. Same devil, same one. Where here we see him pitted against Michael and the good angels that didn't fall away when Satan was cast out of heaven for his iniquity. He swept a third of the angels with him, and those became what we know today as demons, working together with Satan to bring the destruction of mankind. The Bible says that they don't come but to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what they're all about, and that's all they do, right? But God intends for them to be our ministers, to actually help us by presenting a resistance to us, which on our own strength, there's no way we can overcome. But by the power of God, we not only can overcome it, but conquer it. And God's intent is to make overcomers out of us who believe. And to be an overcomer, you have to have something to overcome. And so Satan presents that opposition to belief in Jesus Christ by continuing in the face of persecution, in the face of resistance, and in the face of opposition to say, I will serve and worship the Lord my God, and him only will I serve, no matter what. And we press through and over and into and refuse to be turned away by that opposition. And by the power of God, not by our own strength, but by the strength that God gives us to overcome, we overcome. And this brings great glory to not only God the Father, but also God the Son, who died for us and rose again from the dead, so that we might be made strong in him and overcome all the forces of darkness arrayed against us. He has a plan. He has a purpose. Satan thinks he's trying to destroy us, but God looks at the same things that he's doing as opportunities for us to overcome and to be strengthened. That's why we count it all joy for the various trials and tribulations that we're made to endure, knowing that it's the working or trying of our faith that works patience in us. But God counsels us to say, let patience have her perfect work in you. Don't resist and fight the struggle, right? Because it's working and perfecting faith in us, right? That's what we're to be about in these days. So even though there's a great struggle and tribulation that the Bible predicts are coming in the days just around the corner, we are not dismayed. We believers are not afraid. We are not even fear-mongering, running around and saying, the Lord is coming, be in fear, he's going to crush you, he's going to do this, and the world's going to end and you won't be ready. But it's not about that at all. It's really about, we only have a short time left to come to the recognition and the realization of the intensity of God's love for us. It will come to an end where instead his mercy will go whoop, and then he becomes the judge. But that's a ways off. We still have time. Right now, he's the God of the richest, greatest mercy that we could ever comprehend. And his kindness to us actually leads us to say, Lord, I'm sorry for the way I've lived. Come, receive me. It leads us to repentance. That is, to turn from our own way and to turn to do things his way. It's his kindness that does that. It's his love, right? I'm a proclaimer today, not of the struggle that's coming and it's around the corner and of the things happening in the Middle East and all that. I'm a proclaimer today of the love of God, which surpasses our understanding, which gives us hope in these days because that love is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Spirit who has been given unto us. That's what I preach in these days, and that's really what I'm about. Getting back to this, the Israelis and what's happening in Israel right now. So we know that this peace agreement has got to establish a Palestinian state, the two-state solution. It's got to create a sharing arrangement for Israel. It's got to allow the Jews to rebuild their temple. Remember, it said that Satan would stand in the temple and declare himself God. That means there needs to be a temple for him to stand in. So I suspect that this agreement will allow the Temple Mount to become shared not just the city of Jerusalem. They'll delay this whole thing of whose capital it is and all that stuff, even though it really belongs to the Jews. They'll delay that and sort of continue to share East Jerusalem, which is where the Temple Mount rests. This is where the temple was. It's where the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque are today, right? Where the Muslims went into the holiest spot and quickly erect their temples and their things there to try to claim the spot as holy. But Islam has only been around since 600 AD, right? The Jews had this spot as their capital since David's time, 1000 BC, 1600 years before Islam was ever even a religion, right? It really, in terms of who has a right to the spot, it's the Jews. Never mind any of that. It's going to come to a sharing agreement for it because the Palestinians will never back down. They think that this should be their capital for some reason, even though it's never been their capital in all the history of it. They think this is the spot. And a lot of that is just because Satan is driving the thing. Remember, the covenant is being confirmed with him and his people here. And the Jews, who are God's chosen people, confirming the covenant God made with them. Now, the Bible actually says, and I'm not actually for this agreement, right? Because the Bible says that the Jews should never make any sort of agreement for the land that God gave to Abraham. They shouldn't do it. And I'm not praying for them to do it. But the reality is that they haven't been following God closely for some time, right? And they've denied really that Jesus is their Messiah. And so they've lost touch with the God of their fathers, even though they don't know it. They believe that they're doing God's will still today. And out of that position, they're going to make an agreement with these Palestinians in spite of the fact that the Bible counsels them never, ever to do that. And so I'm more just looking and saying, just like God said, they won't obey me still. And they're going to make this agreement with the Palestinians, some sharing arrangement now. They're going to give up some of their land for the Palestinians to have their state. They should never do that. They're going to create a sharing arrangement for the city of Jerusalem. And then finally, they're going to rebuild their temple. And this agreement, no doubt, will give them permission. Right now, it's illegal for them to even go up on the Temple Mount. Not only will they be able to go up there, but they'll be able to start rebuilding their third temple, and it'll get erected probably right next to or near the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. They're not going to have to destroy those to rebuild their temple. They're going to share it. And we can see this even, I think I'm looking in Revelation chapter 12, and maybe it's Revelation 11. No, there's the great sign. Actually, let me finish. It says that the certain Satan was cast out. He deceives the whole world. He was cast down to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And he heard a voice in heaven saying, "Now has come salvation and strength in the kingdom of God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, who accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him with by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and because they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil has come down unto you." Remember, this is right at that midpoint, 3.5-year period into the 7 years. And it says, "He having great wrath, because he knows he has but a short time." The wrath is not the wrath of God in those final 3.5 years. It's the wrath of Satan. And that's when he's going to come into the Antichrist in full power, reveal and says, "I'm God." That's Satan in the Antichrist saying, "I'm God." And he'll begin to immediately persecute and kill the Jews. Then he's going to turn on that, reunite with this false prophet, and I'll go into that another time. And they too are going to rule the earth with an iron fist and force everyone to take this mark in their right hand or their forehead and pledge allegiance to this Antichrist and this one world government. It's coming. It's around the corner, right? So the Jews, like I said, they're going to get an opportunity to rebuild their temple. The Bible actually says measure the temple, but leave the outer courts unmeasured. I think that's in Revelation. There it is in Revelation 11. "And there was given unto me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar and them that worship therein. But the court which is outside the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given to the Gentiles, and the holy city shall be tread underfoot 42 months, 3.5 years, 42 months, right? Here we see it again, that they're supposed to measure the temple, but not the outer courts. And that's why I know the temple can be built in one spot, but the court around the temple, right? That other area where today the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock sit, is given by God according to the prophecy in Revelation 11 to the Gentiles or the Palestinians. And that's why I believe that there's going to be a sharing of that area. And that's all going to get kicked off by whenever this agreement is signed. Now, is this Trump agreement the agreement that kicks off this? We'll have to wait and see what's in it. Nobody knows what's in it. And certainly we don't know if the Jews will sign it and the Palestinians will sign it and the region will sort of approve of this thing. We don't know that yet. You know, it could be and could not be. I just don't think it's very long off. Whether it's this agreement or another agreement or one just sometime after that, it's coming. It will happen as sure as I'm sitting here saying so, because the word of God is true and every prophecy of the Bible always comes to pass exactly as it states, without fail. I'm absolutely confident that this is going to occur just like it says that it will. And finally, I'd just like to touch on the fact that they have this election going on over there. And right now, Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's kind of in bed with Donald Trump, and he's sort of running on the I'm a pro-Trump platform. Me and Trump are ace coombs. And because Trump is very popular in Israel these days because he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, is really endorsed and is declared Jerusalem to be Israel's capital. And the Jews just love the fact that Trump appears to be aligned with their interests. So with Trump having so much popularity there, Benjamin Netanyahu, he is the politician down to his toes, has latched his ship to Trump and say, yo, Trump and I together are going to get the best deal for Israel, right? But recently this thing got thrown in the wrenches. This reminds me of when they came in there and the last second stuff that always happens in our elections, right? Whether it be Hillary getting, the whole email thing coming up again, right, the last minute, 2 weeks before, or Trump getting this whole revelation about the fact that he said this nasty stuff about women, and this happened a few weeks before. Well, here's Netanyahu's, right? Now he's being indicted for bribery and all kinds of other stuff over there, so salacious stuff. And that seems like it might try to undo his re-election bid here. And so will that happen? I don't know, because we know politicians, man, they're slick. The poop can hit them and slide right around the neck and down the back, and you never even know it hit them because they're good at what they do. And so we don't know if this will stick and this will make him too funky and too hot a potato to elect. But whoever it is that gets in there, if you get to, because they're all right wingers, it's just some are center right or far right, the people who are running. And one of them, Naftali Bennett, he basically is like one of the religious, the guy who's the Orthodox representative, if you will, Labor Party leader, right? This Avi Gabe. And he just announced his own plan. Look, if you elect me, I got a plan already. And my plan says this is paths to separation. And he's all for this two-state solution. And he said within 6 months, we'll drive it in there. We'll get the Israelis out there. We'll come up with a plan to get the Jews out of their area. We'll give the land over there to the Palestinians. And so we'll have peace because I'll be driving for peace. So he's somebody who seems like he's going to be pushing. He loved the Donald Trump plan, very likely, if he got in there. So it seems like there's some agreement within those that are running in Israel, or at least to be accepting or listen at least to the Trump plan when it is revealed. So is this the start of the final 7 years? Is that right around the corner? Is this the deal of the century going to be the one that kicks off the final years to the return of Jesus? Interested minds want to know. And of course, I'll be watching very, very, very carefully. Hey, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless you. Peace. Let me see if I can